Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our latest episode of Shots of Legends. We always feel privileged to be able to feel your presence out there. So today we'll bring you this very special guest from Pennsylvania, who's going to tell us about his job, about his career, about what he's willing to achieve in the next couple years. We'll be talking with Brandon, who's going to tell us about this documentary he's working on. So stay tuned and don't forget to follow us on our social media. Thank you for accepting our invitation and for being part of Chat with Legends.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you here. So, how's your day going? How is everything around there?
Everything's going great. In fact, I just received a assembly cut of the documentary we finished. So I was trying to get through a little bit of it, watch a little bit of the footage before the meeting. So the rest of the weekend will be, watching our currently 3.5 hour cut and
Yeah.
figure out what I gotta cut down.
So, how is going? I know you're working on Resident Evil right now, and you might be talking about that documentaries. Can you tell us a little bit about that? The process and the feedback and the results you're willing to achieve, and what is all about. Talking about this
Well,
documentary in particular, what are you trying to show us with this work?
well, the Resident Evil documentary is specifically about uh, director George A. Romero, who was most famous for Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead. He was hired by Constantine Film back in 1998 to adapt the best-selling video game Resident Evil and make it into a feature film. So the documentary itself chronicles not only that time period, but it also kind of shows the relevancy of Romero himself and his influence upon the video game series, leading into why he was even hired to begin with. And then it goes through the process and eventually the fallout that occurs, and then what happens after.
Mm.
So it's very much as complete as it can story about everything. So for the documentary itself, a lot of the things that we had to take into consideration were the fact that a lot of this information was originally lost or only known to a handful of people, or maybe someone just hadn't been in contact for years. We really did strive to reach out as many people as possible. The other thing too is that would have been the older days of the internet, and a lot of websites have gone bust.
Mm.
So we had to use a lot of resources to track down little bits of information. I think some people may not even realize that Romero was doing chat sessions with fans back in the late 90s, Yahoo Chat, and a couple others. So we managed to track that information down and get little bits of information that went into his mindset at the time. So it really was probably, I want to say, a year to a year and a half of just research, between tracking down various people to even searching the internet, finding documents, making contacts with people to do the research and try and find all this information. And then from there, we actually started coming up with how we were going to visually tell this story.
Mm. Are you happy with the process? If you analyze the goals you have set, and when you analyze the results now, are you happy with the process and the thing that you designed in your mind? Like, I need to achieve this kind of result for this job you're doing right now.
I am I am happy as I could be. The production itself had a lot of hurdles to get over, but thankfully the vision that I set upon was the one that got realized, and in some places it's better than what I thought it could have been. Um, and one of the initial reactions when the project was announced was, George Romero wrote a script and then he got fired. What more is there to say? And it's like, well, I think we shot over 20 hours of footage. So there's plenty of information in there that kind of connects into that story. But yes, I'm very happy with the results, but it's a painful process between coming up with something that I wanted to feel a little bit different than a typical documentary, because most documentaries, they have maybe reenactments, but the majority of it is just photographs and people sitting against a black backdrop and getting interviewed. And I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to do something that would just look like a YouTube video. I wanted this to feel very cinematic and very much an homage to the work of George Romero. And the process itself can be very painful. And I joked with a lot of people after we wrapped that, the one thing I was really looking forward to was trying to make this feel like a George Romero film. And I think I got what I wanted, but what I was meaning by that statement was, visually, creatively, and instead it was like all the other stuff where we're trying to make our budget work for the vision. We, having production issues, just everything that George went through in in a negative way with some of the films that he's made. So I joked about, well, that's what I get for saying I want a George Romero type production. But everything came out great, and I had a great team that was involved in this. And really, this would not have came together without the team that was involved.
So as a filmmaker, as a screenwriter, producer, director, what makes you unique? If you analyze your job, what you've done until now, what makes you unique?
Well, this is honestly my first production, but it was something that, I was influenced by films like, film directors like George Romero, John Carpenter, Tobe Hooper. I strive to do everything as practical as possible. That's very much something that Christopher Nolan is known for. One of the things that I've discovered about myself during this process is how much I strive to do everything practical. And I like the older feel of movies. And I'm trying to think who it was that made the statement before. It may have been Quentin Tarantino. But film has weight to it. When you watch an older film that was shot on film, there's something about it where it just feels more real. And even though we shot everything digitally, we went back through and, AI generated film grain onto the image because we didn't want it to have that slick, modern look to it. We wanted it to have an older feel, from 70s, 80s, 90s, where you can really see the film grain. And honestly, that made a world of difference for making it just feel more cinematic. The other thing too is I don't tackle a project and go for what's easy. Some of the producers involved were a little bit worried when I said, hey, I'm going to go spend a lot of money and go film at an actual mansion. And they're shaking their heads, looking at the budget and just saying, why would you do this? Couldn't you just shoot inside of a house, like right here, like within the, a 5-mile radius? And it's like, no, we got to go where the mansions are. So, that's something that, I'll butt heads with. And, they ended up realizing I was right and thanked me for fighting against them to make sure that that's where we went.
No, that's wonderful. I was going to ask you about this particular thing. How do you see these AI things nowadays? I was listening. I mean, I read something about James Cameron, and he said that, oh, I tried to wake you up way back to to the 80s when he first launched the Terminator. Say like, oh, I tried to
Yeah.
warn you that this thing AIs might harm you actually. So how do you see the AIs looking to the latest productions and the impact of it in the film industry?
Well, I think AI in itself is a tool, but you can't over rely on it. It's the same thing that I have an issue with CG. Anything that's digital, you look at some films that rely too heavily on CG, and then you're left with a film that just looks animated. And at the end of the day, what was the point? But in terms of AI specifically, it's only a tool. I think that we need to protect people's jobs. I support, the writer's strike and the SAG strike
Yeah,
because they're correct. When you
yeah,
have technology that can scan a crowd of people, and this was one of the things that came to light was that there's technology out there that when they bring in background actors, it can scan all those actors, and it's within their contracts that you come in, you get paid your $100 a day, and then they can reuse you for every film that they want and not have
yeah.
to pay you another dime.
Mm,
Same thing with writing AI writing apps and things where if there's no regulation behind it, then computers just write all your scripts for films. And
mm,
I don't think that's right. And I think it lacks the human heart, the human spirit
mm,
behind those words. I don't think, at least right now, I don't think AI can match the ingenuity of a human being
mm.
and the passion behind it. It's just a computer. It's just, you know, uh, code,
Yeah.
zeros and ones that are creating what it's told to create without any sort of passion.
Mm. No, just to follow. So I was going to ask you about the process. How did it all started? I mean, I'm talking about the first step you gave as a filmmaker, as a producer, as a screenwriter. Can you tell about this? And can you tell about the people that actually impacted, had some kind of influence in this decision of becoming the professional you are today?
Yeah, well, some of the people that influenced me was George Romero, definitely. And that's one of the reasons why I decided to do this documentary. It was kind of like a thank you for just inspiring me. I honestly never got to meet him in person. It was everything that um, people said about him and the
Mm,
way he carried himself and his words and his actions as a human being. And then the films themselves just inspired me and made me feel like I could do this too. So the process for the documentary um, was that, once I came up with the idea and said, and originally I thought this was going to be something short. I thought maybe 30 minutes, maybe there's 30 minutes. And at the time I was only looking at archive information. I didn't even know that I could get a single interview.
mm,
So I partnered up with a gentleman who had written an article about 10 years ago, and it was all about the history of the first Resident Evil film. So I asked him if he wanted to partner up and expand upon that article, and he agreed. So we began doing more research because he wasn't exactly satisfied with the article, and he felt like there was more information out there. So we did about a year and a half of research and spoke with slowly started like following little breadcrumbs. And then we suddenly realized that we could do easily a 90-minute documentary
mm,
easily. So through some contacts, I managed to get a hold of Capcom, the creator of the Resident Evil video game, and pitched to them this documentary because I knew that if I was going to be uh, showing video game footage and talking about their property and possibly interviewing past or present employees, I should probably get some sort of permission, because I knew that no matter what, I wanted to show elements of the game within the documentary. And they ended up approving everything. So everything is official. It's an officially licensed Resident Evil documentary, which was really cool. And I had to do all that myself, and negotiate with a Japanese corporation to get these rights. It went very smoothly, and I was kind of surprised at how positive they were receiving the idea. I think when it comes to larger studios and corporations, you think, they're not really going to care, but I found that Capcom really does care about its fans and like the ideas that they have. And if you come in with, a solid plan, a solid idea, and you have the means to get it done, they're very, very positive towards it. Once we kind of got a lot of the clearances, talking to George's widow and Capcom, we did reach out to Constantine Film, who owns the film rights and obviously are part of the story, but they obviously didn't want any part in a documentary that kind of talks about some of the troubles on the original film. So after that, I was trained through reading books and watching seminars, and that's how I got my knowledge and my experience. So I knew that I needed people that were professionals, maybe not, Hollywood level, but I needed people that knew exactly what they were doing to help get this thing off the ground. So I went with a local filmmaking company, because I wanted to try and keep this as based in Pennsylvania as possible. There was something about the fact that George Romero shot most of his movies in Pittsburgh and around the Pittsburgh area, all in Pennsylvania. I thought that would be kind of neat to keep it all within Pennsylvania as much as possible, just as another, homage to the director himself. So I reached out, found a group of people, found a cinematographer that's in Pennsylvania, who turned out to not only love Resident Evil, but he had actually studied George Romero when he was in filmmaking school. And that was like one of his big idols. So he absolutely jumped on board this. And then from there, things just clicked into place. Next thing I know, I'm talking to people that back in the late 90s, when I'm playing the Resident Evil games, I thought I would never meet in my life. And here I am, like, talking to them. And I don't know, it's a weird experience.
Yeah, it might be amazing to to be living that dream.
Yeah. So we reached out, contacted, we sent out a lot of emails trying to contact the different people that were involved at different stages. So people that were involved with the video game, with George Romero, with the Resident Evil movie, with the Resident Evil commercial that George did. And we got as many as we could. And I think we ended up doing 23 interviews. But once we got all the interviews locked, we were able to break down our budget. And then we reached out through private investors to help fund the film. And one of the people that was a huge help with this was John Lepper of Sifuna Ventures. They actually ended up becoming our sales agency, but he had his whole network of contacts and managed to actually get us private investors on top of the money that came from personal contacts of mine, as well as my own finances. And we put together a pretty good budget to get the film done. So once we got our budgeting done, then we locked out our schedule, and really it was kind of like a little bit here, a little bit there. A lot of it had to do with scheduling the interviews,
Mm,
because when you're trying to get 20 some different people on camera, that's what really slowed us down. I think it took us from beginning of February until mid-June, and
mm.
then we did a little bit of pickup shots on our own at the beginning of the month. So, and so it took a good bit, like 5 months, 6 months to get this documentary filmed. And I think
So, so,
for
so,
some,
so, so when are you releasing to the theaters?
uh, the documentary itself, we have to have it delivered here in a couple months to the distributor. It should be released early 2024.
Okay.
It's just a matter of we're still in post-production. We're still in post-production. We're going through making our cuts because they're not going to accept the 3.5 hour documentary.
Mm.
So we're going through that, getting the color grading, the music, um, audio all done. And then we have to have that submitted here um, before Halloween.
Mm.
And then that gives them enough time to do their marketing, and then we'll go from there. Now, we have a few distributors that are interested, but of course, that all gets into legal stuff that is beyond me.
Mm.
That's all through the agent and the various companies that are interested in it. We did just announce earlier in the week that Pablo Kuntz, who was the voice of Albert Wesker in the original game, he is our narrator for the documentary. He's already recorded all of his dialogue, and it was a good bit too. I felt really bad for him, delivering this giant stack of a giant script and saying, "Yeah, that's all your dialogue."
Yeah.
But he was absolutely ecstatic um, doing the narration for this. And we recorded everything, and then once we got everything recorded, that's when we decided to announce that he was going to be the narrator. And
Mm.
fans are going nuts over that right now. That the original one of the
Yeah.
original actors is
Yeah.
coming back to be
This
part of the
documentary. Yeah.
Resident Evil universe. Yeah.
Mm. No, that's amazing. That's amazing. So two questions before we finish our chat. I would like to know,
Okay.
where do you see yourself from 5 years from now? I mean, I'm talking about expectations. I'm talking about projects and goals. What are you willing to achieve in the next couple years?
Well, one of the things that I just did was I partnered up with a couple other filmmakers, and we created a company called Knights of the Dead. And that is with George Demick, who was the apprentice to George Romero. And he had apprenticed on Knight Riders. He was in Day of the Dead, and he's done his own films. Chris Pearson, who runs the company Sleep and Fear, and he's done a variety of work between Nickelodeon. He did some stuff for I think the won't like Disney World, like
Mm.
running like suits and stuff. I may be saying some of this in error. And then he's done like costume design and prop design for like major bands, as well as special effects in movies and stuff. And then the fourth member is George Demick's son, Carson. So together we've created this company of like-minded filmmakers. So we do have some projects in the works. I don't know if I'm allowed to say exactly what we have planned, but
Okay.
I'm hoping that within 5 years, I can move out to Pittsburgh. I'm not really a Hollywood guy. Like I'm not.
Okay.
Um, like I'd love to work in Hollywood, but I know
Yeah.
that that's gonna take some time. But I'd love to move to Pittsburgh, which is only about 2.5 hours from where I live,
Yeah.
because that's a major filmmaking hub. And I've always considered myself more blue collar than white collar. So I like to
Okay.
be where the work is. I
Mm.
like to, I like to be where the filming is actually happy. The business meetings, negotiations, things like
Mm,
that don't interest me, but it's a necessary part.
mm,
I'm happiest when I'm on a set filming a movie, and I'm just overjoyed like a little kid.
mm,
So I'm hoping in the next few years to have a couple more projects under my belt. I got one that I'm producing next month. Another project I'm helping out with and producing in September. And then I have another film that I'll be hopefully putting into production next year, and then producing yet another one at the end of next year.
mm,
So it's going to be a very busy next 18 months getting about 3 or 4 films done. And
mm.
hopefully from there, based upon the success of the documentary and the contacts that I've made, I'll be able to get these out there. Hopefully there'll be an audience for them. You know, people are interested in what I do, and then I can keep moving up from there. I will say, just as a like a tease,
Mm,
that I'm currently in negotiations to get the rights to a video game property.
yeah.
Um, so my goal is to adapt a video game, which I don't want to say because the
Okay.
negotiations are going on, but
Yeah.
my goal is to get the rights to that video game and make a feature film.
Mm,
So we'll see how things go. But I've been pretty busy. I have a stack of scripts that are already written, and we're hoping to start getting into production on a lot of these projects. So hopefully in 5 years I'll be making bigger movies.
that's good. That's great. We wish you all the best in that process. But how do you see the film industry nowadays comparing to the 60s, to the 70s, to the 80s? Do you think we are evolving as a film industry? You think the film industry is evolving, looking to the latest productions?
Hmm.
And
I
when you go back to Francis Coppola, to The Godfather, etc., do you think we're evolving as a filmmakers, as a film industry?
okay. I think yes, definitely the film industry has evolved, and in multiple ways, both good and bad. And you see it through the rise of various media platforms. So you could say that the 70s were a good year for, or a good decade for
Mm,
independent filmmaking. It was like the rise of independent filmmaking where everyone was going out and shooting movies and getting played on drive-throughs. You know, like
mm,
you had a lot of the grindhouse movies and such. Then the 80s evolved with the idea of VHS. So you could go
mm,
to a video store and rent movies, and that actually helped out a lot of independent filmmakers.
mm,
And then eventually, once you look at today's current state, where Hollywood is doing tentpole films, they're event films, they're superhero films, video game adaptations, it has to have name value. And I think that's showing that Hollywood is not the way it used to be. They talk about, you know, one of the big successes for Hollywood was the fact that they were the big screen. You know, it's a different aspect ratio. You could do more, bigger budgets.
mm,
TV at the time was black and white, and you had very small budgets. You had very simple shows. So to be wowed, you had to go to the movies. But you notice that on TV, budgets have increased. And then now with the rise of streaming platforms like Netflix, you can go watch something on the level of Lord of the Rings by
yeah,
just going to watch The Witcher, you
yeah.
know, which is on Netflix, and you can sit at home and watch it on TV. So I think for Hollywood, you're seeing you're kind of in this weird transitionary period. And streaming platforms were really good for independent filmmakers, but now you're starting to see a shift where what is that? Zack Snyder, for example,
Mm,
is now he has like a 10 picture Netflix deal, and you can start to see the shift where you're seeing Hollywood actors appearing more and more on streaming platforms, and Hollywood directors are going to streaming platforms. I mean, they had Martin Scorsese did The Irishman for Netflix, and now
Yeah.
he has a new film that he's doing for I want to say it's Apple TV.
Mm.
So you're seeing this transition where now these streaming platforms have made the big bucks. So now they're trying to pull in Hollywood filmmakers.
Mm.
And now the independents are kind of being pushed out, I think. And if not, then I see within the next 5 years, you'll probably see less and less independent productions
Productions.
on
Mm.
on the streaming services, which is bad because now independent filmmakers have to find yet a new way of making films and getting it in front of an audience, because unfortunately physical media is dying off. It's getting lower and lower each year. DVD, Blu-ray, it's less sales every year.
Yeah.
More people want digital. So
Mm.
now we have to try and figure out a better way. And it's the old saying, adapt or die.
Yeah.
So filmmakers have to adapt to the changing conditions. I think right now with the strikes going on, that is showing a lot of the issues within Hollywood boiling up to the surface. And I don't know how that is going to affect things moving forward. I
Mm.
mean, there's always going to be films being made, and I'm sure everything is going to get resolved peacefully. And I hope that writers and actors get the rights that they deserve.
Deserve. Yeah.
But how it functions in the long run will be very interesting. I know a lot of people have theorized that the idea of doing the $500 million budgeted movie is kind of going away
Yeah.
because there's been too many big budget failures. But then, the next Avatar comes out or a new Star Wars movie, and, they seem to do well, or at least are projected to do well. So maybe you'll see less of them, but I think you'll still see big movies. I would really like to see Hollywood try and do something different, because
Mm.
right now everything just kind of feels like it's too long. Like we've had superhero movies for like
Yeah.
15 years, and
Yeah.
anymore that's all it feels like you're watching.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that we'll start to see different movies that
Different
are
things. Yeah. Different stories,
like
different patterns. Yeah.
yeah, like it's weird to think that like some of the like nowadays the big summer films are superhero films, but then you think back to movies like Jaws,
Mm.
Aliens, Jurassic
Yeah.
Park, Independence Day.
Yeah.
There were these like really awesome ideas in films, and some of them were based on books, but
And we somehow miss
have,
those moments, those movies. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it was a different time period, a
Yeah.
different level of special effects, just a different caliber of filmmaking, a different way of making movies. And I hope that between a lot of the box office failures with streaming service kind of being in direct combat with how theaters work, I'm really hoping that Hollywood switches up how they do things, and maybe start giving some of the independent filmmakers maybe a closer look. Because even James Gunn, who's now in charge of DC and
And this,
done all
yeah.
these great films, he started out doing low budget films. You
Yeah.
know, he
Yeah.
so it's something where some of the independent filmmakers have the ideas and have the ingenuity. They just need a budget, and they need someone to get behind them and say, "Hey, we're going to help you get this movie made." So I find that interesting, and I hope that we see more of that as some of the independent filmmakers start pushing into Hollywood, and hopefully we'll see a change where we can kind of get new original ideas into theaters, and hopefully they'll still be theaters.
One last question. What moves
Hmm.
you? What do you how do you find the sense in life so you can get motivated to write the project you write, the movies you produce? What moves you as a professional, as a screenwriter, as a producer, as a director you are? What is the biggest inspiration in life before we finish this chat?
Hmm. I would say that I'll try and answer this a couple of ways. One is I'm just very artistic to begin with. I always have been. And filmmaking for me is like it's a combination of everything I love to do.
Mm.
You know, between my imagination, between drawing, between writing, acting, like I love like when I write scenes, I will act them out. You know, I'll just be in my office just acting out dialogue because I want to know how it feels. But it's all these different things that I'm interested in, and combining them together is one of the reasons why I do what I do. It's such a huge outlet. Um, I'm inspired by, again, George Romero and all these older directors, and that's what keeps me moving. I'm still being introduced to older films and I get inspired. When I write, I listen to music and I listen to music appropriate to the genre that I'm writing. You know,
Mm.
if I'm writing a horror film, I might pop on, you know, 2 or 3 albums by John Carpenter. It might be The Fog, it might be Halloween, it could be anything. But I love listening to John Carpenter when I write. I think that guy is
Yeah,
just extremely talented,
yeah.
both as a writer, director, and musician.
Mm.
So that's what kind of propels me for that. But honestly, one of the major thing that helps me like just get motivated to complete a project is once I visualize it in my head, I
Mm.
have to see it become reality. And it becomes painful to not get it out of my head.
Mm.
Like it's like I have to see this become reality. And that happened many a times working on Resident Evil. I would
Mm.
have a shot in my head and I'd say, I have to get this filmed. Otherwise, I'm just not going to be able to sleep. And we would film it and then I'd be at peace. So it's a matter of coming up with an idea, already having everything visualized in my head, getting it on paper, and then filming it. And it's the process that keeps me motivated to keep going. Um, Beyond that, it's just the idea of having a career where I can be creative, like, and just continuing to push further and further into that career. It's amazing to just be able to be creative and express your voice.
Mm.
And yeah,
Oh, no, that was amazing talking to you, and we hope to see you in the next episode of Chats with Legends, so we can be able to know about the results after you release this documentary on the. And we're actually willing to know about the feedbacks and the sensation of releasing this documentary that has this kind of meaning to you, because we see that is somehow personal, because you're talking about someone you admire, you follow, you have followed this path, etc.
yes, I would love to come back. Um, yeah, that'd be great. Um, yeah, again, I love George Romero, and again, I hope I hope this is successful because I want to ensure that you know, my love for George Romero comes across,
Yeah,
and I hope that people enjoy it when they see it
yeah,
because again, this is just a love letter to the man that inspired me to pursue filmmaking.
yeah, yeah. We will surely love it. So it was a pleasure to talk to you, and wish you a great day. See you in the next opportunities.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye bye.
Bye.
Yeah. Amazing chat we had today with Brandon. We thank you very much. It was a pleasure to have you here, Brandon, and knowing about the work you're doing, know a little bit more about this documentary about George Romero's path. It's amazing to realize how the film industry is evolving through this kind of works, and it's important to feel that. we still have people who are trying to pave the way so we can keep believing somehow in the possibility of finding different stories in the film industry. It was a pleasure to have you there. We hope to see you in the next episodes of Shots of Legends. See you.